I would add the following. We should never lose sight of virtue, integrity, and honor in leadership. And these are not just words, they are calls to action. And if I would summarize my personal belief with regard to leadership, indeed, the actions in my life in general, it is simply deeds, not words.
A question for General Washington, Mr. Jefferson, of your impressions in Mr. Jefferson's friendship with Thomas Paine.
With who?
With Thomas Paine, sir. Mr.
Oh,
Paine.
I'm sorry, I could not hear you. The corset maker.
Sir, you've already begun to speak of Thomas.
You know, Thomas, I must admit I have had a great amount of that American beverage today, coffee. And so I am uncharacteristically out of control. I apologize.
Your Excellency, I've always considered coffee to be the drink of the civilized world. Perhaps this has lifted your spirits then to be the more vociferous than usual.
Perhaps it is.
I understand it is my place now to speak. The most felicitous pen I have ever known, the pen of Thomas Paine. I was first introduced to him in Philadelphia City the spring of 1776. He had been here about a year. He had printed in that city his pamphlet, The Common Sense. Indeed, it was more readily received into the hands of the citizenry than anything ever published in America before, save the Holy War in various translations. I was quite taken by his documents, and in my very first meeting with him, sir, having, of course, the privilege of an education, a Latin school, an English academy, the Old World College of William and Mary, reading law with Mr. George Wythe in Williamsburg, I wondered, pondered, which author throughout human history has been his greatest inspiration? And when I put forth this question unto Mr. Paine, do you know, he replied to me in that bold Irish accent of his. He said, sir, he said, my inspiration has been found in the taverns, inns, and ordinaries of America. The people, the common man.
In your presidency, have you ever picked out one event that was kind of a lucky break, that helped change things, that moved things ahead during your presidency?
You know, Madam, I am put to mind once again of our glorious contest, which of course ultimately led to the presidency. I do not believe that one can look at the events of our years leading up to American independency and the great contest that occurred afterwards without the fact that one would believe in the interposition of divine providence. There are countless examples during our War of Independence where we should have been defeated. It should have been over. I will cite just two that occurred in one day. We are meeting the British at Brooklyn Heights. I have covered all of the possible means of attack, save for one small road. The British provide a feint. We think it is the vanguard of the entire army. It is not. The entire army is marching behind us on that one small road. And so they are having the Lord Harry with us. And they push us back to our breastworks. They are 600 feet from us, and they stop. Night was beginning to fall. It was just dusky, madam. Had they pressed their advantage, the war might have been over then and there. They did not. That same evening, with the American army behind its breastworks, the British 600 feet away, my entire army under the cover of not just the darkness, madam, but the fog that had set in, retreats across the East River under the very bowsprits of the British Navy onto the Manhattan Island. Only one of countless examples. So that is what comes to mind. During the presidency, keeping Jefferson and Hamilton apart was a miracle.
Should the President of the United States have a line item veto?
A line item veto? I have no idea. Do you want to explain it to us? What does that mean, a line item veto? Is it something, an item for sale? Beg pardon?
I think we ought to have Theodore Roosevelt explain what a line item veto is. You have some challenges with budgets.
Of all my accomplishments, money was not one of them. Ask Mother, my second wife Edith. She would give all the children, including me, an allowance each day. I'd promptly spend it and ask for more, and she'd say, Theodore, you've had yours for today, you have to wait for tomorrow. I just don't know where it goes, Edie. I just don't know where it goes. We did have a panic in 1907. Believe it or not, one of the malefactors of great wealth, J.P. Morgan, acted as our Federal Reserve and pulled us out of that panic. Fortunately, I relied on qualified people to take care of the finances of this great nation. Although I was involved with a veto that I did not sign. I'll explain. You see, Congress was going to prohibit the chief executive of this nation from signing away land to put under federal protection. Now I could have signed that veto, but what happens? You know, I could have vetoed it, but what would happen? It would just go back into the process and make more fuss than necessary and eventually be signed at some point in time. The prudent thing was, several weeks before I had to sign that veto, I had leading naturalist and my good friend Gifford Pinchot, our chief forester, a position I created, at the White House with all kinds of maps laid out to pick out at the last moment lands worth saving. So I put aside quite a number of acres before I had to sign that veto. Petra, always use the veto power carefully.
This question is for General Washington and President Jefferson. You've heard from President Lincoln what became of the nation during his time and during his presidency. Do you think that's due to some flaws in the Constitution that you created and weren't able to cover? And was that Constitution meant to be a living document that would be changed later, or a document that's set in stone, everything in it should be interpreted the same over time? Thank you.
Ma'am, I will tell you, in my opinion, we should ever recognize that we become different people every day. We are different people this evening in our associations than His Excellency and myself knew in our very first meeting. We were different people in 1776, several years after that first meeting. We were different people in the very first presidential election, that under our Constitution, and His Excellency was elected, and certainly different people a decade later, when I was elected the third Chief Magistrate. You ought to ask me whether our system of government and law should remain stagnant and not go anywhere. I was concerned about that, yes, when I received that letter aforementioned from Mr. Madison. Oh, you heard my reply. I thought it was an extraordinary document, surely. And yet, I wrote back to Mr. Madison, it lacks something. It lacks something that allows that Constitution to grow. Otherwise, it is stagnant. It does not go anywhere, and it can be read by any government in office to its own particular interests.